Welcome to LegacyCast, your source for hearing from top influencers, industry experts, and successful business owners who are telling their unique story about life, values, goals, business strategies, and the various causes they are so passionate about. Future generations will come to be impacted by what is happening today, whether positive or negative, and our mission is to focus on what is going to affect change for the better. Hosted each weekday by James Snow, a former U.S. Army combat medic, now founder and principal advisor of James Advisors Group, a full-service financial planning firm in North Texas. This is LegacyCast. Welcome to LegacyCast listeners. This is your host, James Snow, coming to you today from North Texas. And I have with me a good friend, guy that's been doing a lot of stuff for a lot of veterans, and I just love having him on the program here today. Mark Rockefeller, CEO of StreetShares, and that's a company that's helping veterans effectively, get some of their business funding so that they can, create their legacy, the way that they're needing to do that. And so it's really a pleasure and an honor to have Mark on the program. Welcome to the program, bud.
Thank you, James. Great to be here.
Yeah, and if you could just briefly, for those listeners that don't know what you do, maybe just in your words, what StreetShares is, and kind of how that is part of what you're wanting your legacy to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this concept that you have around legacy because it's so important. So StreetShares funds veteran-owned businesses. And we do that because we believe that veterans make great entrepreneurs. There is a rich legacy in America going back, decades of veterans leaving the service and becoming business owners. And we want to make sure that that continues. When I came back from Iraq in the summer of 2008, the financial crisis was just kicking off. And so I felt like our generation of veterans, there was unique challenges to getting the funding for your business because we left the service and tried to start a business in the wake of the financial crisis when the banks weren't lending. And so we had this, legacy of veterans becoming business owners. And then for our generation, there was this barrier erected. And so we set up StreetShares to solve that problem and make sure that veterans get the funding they need.
Yeah, and it's a very admirable and just an awesome venture that you've got going here, because with veterans, there's so many statistics out there that show that veterans are 30% more productive, if not better, or they're the income earning potential for veterans just because of the differences between the makeup of what it takes to be someone who serves. Just that potential there is so much greater. And so for you to be backing that up, with being able to help that particular demographic, that should, in theory, help the entire nation, I would think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think veterans make great entrepreneurs for a bunch of reasons that we can discuss. And I think veterans also, more than non-veterans, they hire veterans. So when a veteran grows a successful business, it has this ripple effect that is beneficial across the veterans community and across the country. And it solves, I think, a lot of problems in the veteran space as well, right? It gives us a mission. It gives us a new tribe. Gives us a way to take all the wonderful experience that we have and channel that into something that's just good for the country and good for our community. And so, we're honored to play a part of that. And what we can do is provide them with funding, and we do it in kind of a unique way that allows for others in the military veterans community to back up and support those loans. And so we're both an investment, products and business funding products that we have in the same house, and it's all driven by technology, which just makes it very efficient, very clean.
Absolutely. So do you feel it's important, obviously that people actively put energy into what they're doing to create a legacy, making deliberate choices in creating a legacy?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think if you don't plan, then life just kind of happens. to you.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
can tell you, as someone who is a veteran, who is a father, who's a husband, who's an entrepreneur and a business owner, I do a lot of thinking about legacy and what my legacy is going to be and what I'm going to leave, to my kids and what the world's going to look like for them. And I think if you don't plan, things just happen to you and you're on a back foot, you're responsive. If you plan, you can sort of get, get ahead of things and think strategically, think years in advance. I can do things now that will help set my legacy and help my kids years from now. I think, if you don't plan, you're going to be on the back foot. And I think it's very difficult to create a legacy without planning.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Um, so at this point in your career, would you say that there's still things that maybe kind of keep you up at night with the business, being a CEO, husband, father, et cetera, et cetera? Are there still things that kind of sit there in the back of your mind?
Oh, sure. No, there's business challenges. We're at a phase now where we're just trying to scale, right? So we've built a business that
Sure.
works. We've been able to help a lot of people, but now I really, really want to hit the gas and just scale what we have, right? So we have lent
Sure.
or provided funding over $110 million now.
Wow.
So we've had over $1 billion of economic impact in the military vets community. The folks that we have funded, I believe they employ about 6,000 people now. So that sort of ripple idea,
Sure.
we've had some ripples, and I'm thrilled with that. And I want to have more, and I want to have bigger, and I want to just keep going, right? Because the numbers would tell us that there's 2.5 million veteran-owned small businesses out there.
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to fund a few thousand of them, but there's a lot more that I've that I've got to help. And
Sure.
so we're focused now on simply scaling the model that we have. I like an entrepreneurship and a new business, right? So we're 4.5 years old at this point, to like a nascent biological organism, and like cash
Mm-hmm.
and customers and sales revenue. Those are that's your blood, that's your oxygen that you got to have to grow. Every day that you're alive and you're growing, things get better and better. But there's also predators out there, and the world is changing.
Sure.
We've got to change and stay ahead of it. And so there are constantly things that keep me awake at night. And I think that will likely be the case until the day I die. I mean, if I'm focused on growing and building, something that matters, I'm going to have to, lose some sleepless nights as I try and avoid the things that could be harmful.
Mm-hmm. So just because you have a kind of a unique viewpoint, from what your business model does and kind of where you look at things, there's kind of two schools of thought that I've seen out there. I'm sure it exists both in the civilian world as well, but I've seen it a lot in the veteran community that two different viewpoints on, say, the business plan and the financial plan and those kinds of things, having the good old fashioned structure into place. Is that something that you agree with still having, or that being a little bit less necessary? How do you feel on that?
Yeah, so it depends sort of what stage you're at, right? If you are a very early stage business, most investors know that the projections that you have are just projections, right?
Right.
And they should be taken with a grain of salt because,
Mm-hmm.
the world is a complex and changing place, and it's very difficult to know what the future holds. If you're a fairly established business and you've been through a few iterations and what things cost, what your cost to acquire a customer is, what your cost of goods sold is, what your revenue is, what your gross margin is, and so forth, then I think folks are going to hold you to that a lot more. In our case, we're looking in particular at the cash flows from a business, or we're looking at the contracts that business has. So if you're a veteran-owned business and you've got a large government contract, even if you're a brand new company, and even if your revenues are very, very low, we can provide you some funding based on that contract.
Hmm.
And so, it's going to vary with the kind of business and the kind of funding that you're going after. There's basically two ways to fund a business, right? One is you sell equity in it, so you raise equity.
Hmm.
The pros to that approach are, if the business doesn't work out, you don't have to pay it back, right? Your equity investors are taking that risk alongside you. The cons are obviously that you're giving up ownership in the business, and you're giving up some control
Right.
over the business. The other side is to take on debt, borrow. For businesses that have a very bright future and the cash flow is there, usually borrowing is best because they don't want to give up any ownership, any control, any equity in their
Mhm.
company. But of course, those loans are probably going to outlast your business, right? So if things don't
Right.
work out for you, your creditors still want that money back. So there's pros and cons to either approach. If you're going to grow your business, you've got to have capital one way or the other, or you'll be stagnant
Mhm.
and therefore going backwards.
Sure.
And so, folks have to look at, and then those two different approaches will require different things from your funding source.
Mhm. So, as far as with entrepreneurs and kind of getting started, there, that obviously we see a lot of businesses that struggle and they end up maybe failing, or the business owner gives up. Do you have any insight as far as what you think maybe some of the reason behind that is?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is that the only way that a company ever fails is because the owner gives up, right?
Mhm.
Nearly everything else in a business, and there are lots of hurdles to be cleared.
Sure.
Product market fit, right? Does the market
Mhm.
actually want what my product is? Is the market big enough for my product? Can I
Mhm.
acquire those customers at a reasonable cost? Can I provide them with the good or service at a reasonable cost? And can I make a margin on top of that that makes this whole thing go around and make sense, right? Those are your
Yeah.
basic
Yeah.
questions. All those things, though, can be solved. The one thing that cannot be solved is if the entrepreneur quits or gives up.
Mhm.
And oftentimes it's a cash flow crunch that gets them into a bind. That is, they've got some problem. Maybe product market fit isn't good enough. A few sales went south. They had one big deal that went south, whatever it is, and they've got to make payroll. They need cash now,
Right.
and they don't have it, and so they quit. They declare bankruptcy, and it's over.
Mhm.
Usually, in those cases, there was an out. There was a solution. There was a way to hustle, bootstrap, whatever, and get the additional capital to bridge them through the learning experience that they're having right now, right? Because everything else can be
Mhm.
fixed,
Sure.
right? Product market fit can be fixed, pricing can be fixed, um, you know, acquisition costs can be fixed. I mean, all these things can be fixed. The one thing that is sort of the permanent tie to throw in the towel. And so that's the one thing that just has to be avoided. But it does take some clever and creative financing often to make sure that the lights stay on, in the meantime while they're figuring everything out.
Sure. Sure. So when you're mentioning some of the roadblocks and the resources just earlier, what were some of the specific roadblocks and resources that you would advise someone just starting out? Roadblocks that you've seen that you would warn against, and maybe some resources that would help them to make sure they can get through. Maybe that the first, say 3 to 5 years to get to that point.
Yeah. So my two biggest pieces of advice. Number one is to avoid falling in love with your own product a little too early, and to spend a lot more time focused on the problem in the market that your product or service is solving, and less time focused on the product or service. And that sounds a bit counterintuitive, but here's what I mean by it.
Mhm.
Most entrepreneurs make the fatal mistake of inventing something they think is cool and then trying to find a market for that thing. That's the opposite of
Right.
what one should do. What one should do is focus on a pain point, on a need, on a problem, on an inefficiency, whatever is out there in the market, in the world, that is causing people trouble, and focus on that problem. The more intimately that you know the problem and that you understand the problem, the easier it is to sort of create or fashion a solution to that problem. So most folks do it the opposite. They spend 90% of their time focused on their widget and 10% of the time trying to, figure out what people actually want. And that's the exact opposite from what should be done. Spend 90% of your time focused on the problem that your widget solves and 10% of the time on the widget itself. That's how you create the very best solution, the best widget that the folks actually want. So that's the most common pitfall, and that's the single most important thing for entrepreneurs to focus on. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I would say is to turn to your fellow veterans and treat your fellow veterans as if we were a alumni association from a fancy business school. The community of veteran business owners is, by almost any measure that I can think of, the largest, most influential, most powerful business network in the world. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of business clubs out there and associations. There's all kinds of alumni associations from fancy business schools, but there are more veteran business owners creating more jobs with more revenue, doing more things than, take the alumni association of, Harvard Business School or something. The problem is we don't think of ourselves and organize ourselves like an alumni association, right? Or like a business association. If we did, then we would be the most powerful one in the country. And so there's so many veterans like me who, if you are a fellow veteran, I will give you 15 minutes, no matter what, right? And this happens all the time. I have folks who reach out to me, for advice on this or mentoring on that. You know what? If you're a fellow veteran, I'll find a way to fit you in and just give you some time and just try and help you. And there's a lot of veterans like me who will do that. And Absolutely. So I think, if a veteran who's trying to start a business sort of views things from that perspective and says, all right, I want to, have a contact or talk with someone at company X. Find the veterans that work at company X and sort of network your way into the company that way. And I think more and more we're seeing, at least my generation of veterans, that are sort of treating our association a bit like an alumni association, and we're helping each other out. And that's having some very powerful impact.
Yes, really, really good points there. Because, I've seen that, with we veterans, it's kind of like, you don't have to explain where you've been, what you've gone through and so forth. It's a very comfortable place. And so just, right. Just being able to, that camaraderie, that alone, just creates so much synergy and so many potential, partnerships, just from that basis point. So, I totally agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah. I mean, all of us, whether we were, officer or enlisted or, which branch we were in, and obviously a military experience varies widely. The experience of, an Army or Marine infantryman, in Afghanistan or Iraq is very, very different, from, an Air Force missileer in Minot, North Dakota, right? Just very, very different experiences. But still, there's a common thread and a common bond, and that is that all of us, regardless of branch of service and regardless of, rank, all of us went through some common, basic training boot camp-like experience, right? Mm-hmm. And in order to get through something like that, you have to be able to endure some hardship, be gritty. These are characteristics that just make for good entrepreneurs. And so I think there's a common respect that all veterans should have for each other, regardless of what your branch or your MOS was.
True. Very true. So is there something that maybe earlier in your life you did not do that you've seen, at this point that you probably maybe wish you had done, or do you not look at things like that?
That's a good question. I tend to be fairly introspective, and so I think about things like that, but I also try not to dwell on the past, right? Sure. So I'll be very introspective in the here and now as I'm planning for the future, but what's done is done, right? But to answer your question, I was a total jock growing up all the way through college. So, jock in high school. I walked on the college football team when I was in college, which frankly I was sort of undersized and underskilled to be there, but I worked my ass off. And I tell people my experience was a bit like the movie Rudy without the glorious ending, right? That was sort of my experience in college football. But that was my dream, right? And so I played for a few years in college as a walk-on at a big school, major school. And in hindsight, I may have carried that dream a little too long, right? That is, it was obvious that I wasn't going to go to the NFL, though that was my dream. I probably should have let go of that dream and gone on to the next thing a bit earlier than I did. I think there were some opportunities that I could have done in college, things like study abroad, things like get involved in finance earlier, or a internship on Wall Street. I mean, things that would have taught me a lot that I had to forego because I was so serious about my athletics. And in hindsight, I think I probably missed out a little bit by sort of carrying, my boyhood dream for a year or two longer than I should have. So that's probably my own regret. But things all worked out, and I sort of became kind of a Wall Street lawyer later on after the JAG Corps, and so learned a lot there. So I kind of made up for lost time a little bit. But if I could go back and tell my 17 or 18 year old self something, it would probably be to sort of give up on the childish dream and kind of focus on the big boy dream. At about age 19 or 20.
So how would you say that your personal values and belief systems play into your business currently? And likewise, how would you advise someone else to incorporate those values and belief systems of theirs into their business?
Yeah, first thing I would say is carry your belief system with you. Don't leave that at the door.
Right.
I think business is competitive, and so there's a temptation to, when you enter into business, sort of leave some of those things aside and just focus on, the numbers, the ratios, and the things that matter in business.
Right.
But I think who you are is essential. It's essential to have a structure around your company that is kind of mission focused. Here at StreetShares, we're certainly a missional company. And there's, a lot of people that come to work every day at StreetShares because they love veterans and they want to serve veterans.
Right.
We've given them one of the few opportunities in life to do good and do well. That is, have a good social impact, but also make some good money. There's not many chances like that you get in life. And we've created one here, which is very, very attractive to our employees. And I think if my co-founder and I had kind of left our values at the front door when we started the company, we wouldn't be able to do that. So personally, I'm a Christian, and a lot of my values come from that. In fact, I would say all my values. And I've been able to sort of take those values, my love for a certain community of people, that is the military veterans and military spouse community. They're sort of my tribe, right? They're my people, right? I spent the first 9 years of my life with them.
Sure.
And bring those things together. And we bring them together in a way, for example, where we're serving this community that we care about, but we're doing so in a way that is just very high integrity. In the finance world, there's lots of shady players, and there's lots of half truths and people not telling you what a loan really costs and playing games and that kind of thing. We've committed very early on, both my co-founder and I, who met through church, by the way, to run things in a way that we'd be proud of. I think there's a dozen ways to make money in the world, and when I'm 80 years old, I think I'll probably be in a rocker in a very nice home somewhere, and I want to make sure that I've made that money the right way. Done so with integrity, done so in a way that always gives back. My basic philosophy is this idea of a baseball diamond. They're born on first base, some on second base, some lucky folks are born on third base. And you can't really blame each other for that. The person born on first base, not their fault. They didn't pick their parents any more than the person born on third base. But our responsibility is to take the gifts and talents that God has given us and get around to home plate and score and bring as many people with us as we can. I mean, that's my view. I would say anyone born in America, you're on first base, just how it is. No matter who your parents are or what your background is, this is a very special place. It's a great country with an amazing system that allows us to be entrepreneurs. And so, if you're here, congratulations, you're on first base. You may look with third, may look back at contempt with you. None of that should be happening. We should all just get around and score and bring as many people with us and help as many folks along the way as we can. And that kind of idea, frankly, comes from my Christian faith, right? This idea of to whom much is given, much is expected. And I've been very, very blessed, to be born to two loving parents, be born in a country that allows me to be an entrepreneur. And I, plan on spending every single day, driving toward home base and taking with me as many folks, as I possibly can.
Yeah. Well said, Bob. So when you transitioned out of the service, what hurdles were you faced with that you had to overcome? And then likewise, when you were building StreetShares, what hurdles did you have to overcome in the early stages?
Yeah, let me first acknowledge that there's a lot of people who face bigger hurdles than I did, and I know that. I say that because I had a skill set. I was a lawyer in the military, so I was a JAG lawyer that was more easily transferable to the civilian world than a lot of other jobs in the military. And so I would say that my transition was probably easier or less severe than others face. I've actually looked at the studies on this.
Right.
And what the literature tells us is that the most difficult transition are folks who have been in, between 9 and 14 years and are prior enlisted, right? Like that's the population that tends to sort of struggle the most. And I think it's because you've spent long enough in the military that you've got a way of thinking and habits now, but you may have been doing something that isn't easily transferable to the outside world, right? If you stay in for 20, well, now you got your retirement, and so while you're looking for a job or whatever, you're not that worried because you can still keep the lights on and pay the bills, right? If you transition out much earlier, 4 years, 5 years, you're young and hungry, and it's very easy for you to go back to school or get an MBA with the GI Bill or get your bachelor's, whatever it was. But it's those folks sort of in the middle that I think struggle the most. So many people have struggled more than I have struggled. That being said, it's a very different culture once you're out of the military. And, even I saw this, that when I was in, there's a common assumption, the man or woman to your right or your left, you all signed up for something together, and you did that because you believed in something bigger than yourself.
Yes.
And that's a unifying strand. It's a bond. In the outside world, the commercial world, that isn't there. And so sometimes the loyalty isn't there. Sometimes the trustworthiness isn't there. And, you're just missing that sort of basic bond of trust that I think you have with your fellow veterans. And I missed that, right? When I got into the commercial world, I spent my first couple of years as a lawyer at a Wall Street law firm. And I really, really missed the bonds of trust and unity. I missed the esprit de corps. I missed, frankly, the athletic kind of lifestyle that we have in the military. I missed all those things. And so it took some time adjusting to that. I actually did a lot of mountain climbing and that kind of thing. That was sort of my way of kind of getting away and processing all of it. But so that's, those are kind of my struggles in the transition. And then as an entrepreneur, it was the same thing that everyone else faces, which is, my goodness, can I make this work? Unique to my situation, I was the sole breadwinner in the home, meaning my wife stayed home with our kids. So we had 3 kids then. I have 4 now. And my wife stayed home with them. and I was making good money as a lawyer and was going to leave that and do a startup. My co-founder, by the way, same situation. He was a fairly senior banker, was making good money as a banker. His wife was also a stay-at-home mom. He had 4 kids. And so, we weren't 2 guys who were like 24, 25 and could sleep on someone's couch and eat macaroni and cheese and, just kind of like, bootstrap it. We were 2 middle-aged guys with families who depended on us. And we were leaving behind reasonably well-paying jobs. So that was a unique experience because we're like all in at that point, right? This is serious all in poker. And if this doesn't work out, this is very problematic for our whole family because we had no real, backup plan there. So this was high stakes stuff for both of us. We both left our jobs, started in my basement. The first 9 months we're in my basement. We are living off of credit card debt, basically, and a little bit of savings. So we go through almost all of that. Funny story, the day before I left my law firm, my wife and I both go online because, when you apply for a credit card, it's all about your job as of that date and your income as of that date.
Sure.
And we had a very good credit score at that time. That, by the way, didn't last long once I was not, an entrepreneur. We each took out, I think we must have walked away with like $200,000 in, borrowing capacity from our credit cards, right? All of which we got like the night before I left my law firm because we knew that we would, have to apply while I had that good salary, right? And we use that, right? We use a lot of that debt. We used, we had some real estate, some rental properties that we had gathered as we moved around with the military. We sold off those to pay for things. So this was high stakes stuff.
Yeah.
Went about 9 months with 0 salary. Right. This is living in Northern Virginia with kids in private school, so our burn rate is not low. And 9 months without a salary. And then our first salary, when we raised our first little bit of venture capital, was just tiny. Just a fraction of like what I made at the law firm or he made as a banker. And so, this was high stakes stuff. This had to work. And we were not only risking, ourselves, but so that was that was a scary few months.
I bet. Wow. So when you were coming up with the idea of doing this particular business, what compelled you to go in that direction? Was there a particular kind of a light bulb moment for you that you just decided you wanted to create StreetShares?
Yeah. So my co-founder Mickey and I met through a mutual friend at church. So we both went to the same church, but like really hadn't met each other. And this mutual friend said, "You guys have to meet and talk." And so we met at a Bob Evans. So for those who know Bob Evans, it's like a kind of a cheap diner, right? Like a Denny's, right? So we're at this Bob Evans here in Northern Virginia, and we just began to click. We just the energy, the mental energy, and sort of like playing off each other was just so exciting. And we arrived at this idea of affinity-based lending. Affinity-based lending. And what I mean by that is making a loan to a member of a group, of a tribe, in this case, veterans. And the capital behind that loan comes from their fellow veterans. And the theory was that the borrower would behave differently. That is, they would be extra careful to pay back the loan, because if they defaulted on the loan, they wouldn't be harming some distant monolithic bank, but they would be harming their fellow veterans investing their retirement in them. So we believed in this concept of affinity-based lending. And there's a bunch of sort of touch points for this, right, or proof points. A guy named Mohammed Yunus started something called Grameen Bank that basically did this with like microloans in Africa and worked really well. If you think about like USAA, right, the insurance company, they started with this idea of veterans insuring each other.
Mhm.
So a very similar sort of concept. And we looked at different affinity groups to launch this with. Veterans were the obvious one, but we looked at others. And we decided to launch focused just on veterans. And then once we got into the market, we realized sort of how big the opportunity was. That is how much the need was, that veterans were simply
Right.
being underserved. And so, that was sort of the origin of the initial concept. It obviously, changed and sort of evolved over time. We benefited from a lot of people much smarter than us that we kind of ran the idea by, and a lot of folks began to shape this. Each new person that you add to your team, in particular in the early days, they're also going to shape the idea dramatically as well. So it's very important who you add. But the initial idea was, went around affinity-based lending and serving this community of veterans that was underserved.
Oh, great, great. So other than what you're doing, is there another profession that you've sort of toyed with that you'd like to attempt at some point in life?
That's a good question. I think when I took a survey or a study when I was in college about what kind of jobs you'd be good at,
Mhm.
I believe my results were CEO, so that's a good fit,
Right.
and forest ranger, I think, was the other one, which is a job that I
Oh,
think I would enjoy a great deal.
yeah.
I love the outdoors, spent a lot of time hiking and climbing and such. But I think those were the two things that just my personality, sort of drove me to. I can tell you, though, I spent a lot of my life, early life at least, as a lawyer. Generally, I didn't enjoy that very much, and I'm now doing what I feel like I was meant to do. I've given a talk before on this idea of being self-actualized at work. And if you're familiar with the term self-actualization, right, it's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the bottom are your basic needs like, food and water and clothing and shelter. And then you go up to more advanced needs like, love and belonging and friendship. And at the very, very top is this idea of self-actualization, right, which is basically like you're doing what you're meant to do. In the professional sense, I've only experienced that twice in my life. Once was one particular time when I was serving in Iraq and just doing something that was just right down the fairway for what I was sort of wired to do. I was good at it. It was impactful. I felt like I was, changing the world. I mean, it was just sort of like, perfect for me. The other time is the last 5 years here at StreetShares. So in 17 years since graduating from undergrad, I've experienced this thing maybe a total of 6 years. And so, there's always those sort of phases in life where we do what we have to do while we're trying to find the thing that we really, really want to do.
Sure.
And mine has been this sort of ongoing, journey to discover that thing that I was meant to do. And I think we're pretty much there now. I'm able to,
Mhm.
make a good living doing something that I'm good at, but more importantly, helping a community that I authentically and genuinely care about. And I think that's it's a very, very fortunate situation to be in. And I wish for all of your listeners that
Mhm.
they can find that thing for them.
Sure, sure, and I totally agree with you there because when we're doing just like the saying goes, when you do what you love, you never work a day in your life,
Right.
and so it's there's a lot of truth to that, and we're endowed by our Creator with gifts and talents, and when we're using those gifts and talents, then we're more fulfilled in what we're doing, and so I really feel like it is something of a divine nature even that we should ultimately find that particular spot. So you know it's really good to hear that you're in that place.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's everyone can find it if you find if you view it as sort of like a Venn diagram, with sort of three circles and they all overlap in this one small point, at the center. And it's
Yeah,
it's your passion, it's what you're good at, and it's what the world needs. And sort of where those three
right.
things intersect, that's bliss.
Yep. So what would you say is your greatest character strength if you were to think about that?
I guess I'm a a true believer, right? Meaning, if I set out on a mission or a plan, I really believe in it. So I'm not cynical, I'm not inauthentic, I'm not jaded. I think life is short, and I think if you've been again blessed to be born in this country, you've got a responsibility to do something with that gift.
Sure.
And if you find something that you believe is important, I think it's essential that you really believe it, because if you're the leader and you don't believe it, no one else is going to. In fact, you'll be tempted by others to be cynical or jaded or sarcastic or whatever. But I think I'm a true believer when it comes to a goal or a mission.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, what would you say is maybe the greatest weakness that you struggle with?
Yeah, I've got many. I am sort of ADHD, right? In that I kind of like jump around very, very quickly, which in some ways can be helpful. I think as an entrepreneur, actually, it's not a terrible trait to have, but in life it can be hard, because you might, set a goal for something, or set a, set a time or a deadline and not follow through on that because you're on to the next thing. So that's a problem. I actually have an assistant now, and a lot of what she does is to like help me sort of stay on task and pick up the the loose pieces that I leave behind a lot. And so I think that's certainly certainly a weakness. I can be impatient, which again, as an entrepreneur, there's a place for that, but it also can be very tough on your team. Yeah. And so I can be very, very impatient sometimes. And I think I can imagine in my head that something should be done now, or done immediately, or done a certain way. And, my colleagues have a, better, but maybe slower way of doing it. And that can sort of cause, cause some tension. So I can be impatient and demanding.
Yeah, I can relate with a lot of that.
Yeah,
personally. Yeah. The shiny objects and the squirrels, and oh goodness.
That's it. Yeah. And it's so tough. I mean, I have, I tell my kids all the time that like the key to success is focus, right? It's not passion, because people can be passionate about the wrong thing, right? It's to take all the energy and intelligence and ideas and creativity that you have and apply that to the smallest, narrowest point. Like that's how you actually change the world, right? Applied focus over a period of time, right? That's physics, right? That's force. And as much as I say that, it's something that I myself struggle with. So that can be difficult. And my teenage kids will often remind me of that.
Of course they do. So is there a particular place you go to for your brainstorming to gather your ideas? Some people go to nature for that, or a particular place. How about you?
Yeah, when I was living in Colorado, I did a lot of alpine climbing, mountaineering, time in the mountains. I just love being in the mountains. Here now on the East Coast, I run a lot, and I find that to be very sort of freeing for my mind. Usually while I run, I'll do like books on tape and that kind of thing, and sort of feed, feed my mind during that time. Most of my ideas, though, have come from the shower. And I think it's something about like hot water on your neck, opening up capillaries. I think there's probably some sort of scientific reason for it, but it's when I'm in the shower and relaxed, and it's a hot shower, I'm like just ideas left and right. And so that's sort of my that's my go-to if I'm struggling with a problem, for example, or I've got writer's block, or I'm at an impasse or something like that. Usually a nice hot shower will sort of get the ideas flowing.
Oh, good deal. So if you were to describe at a very high level the process behind what your daily routine looks like, for someone maybe wanting to start a business and trying to maybe get some insight as to the CEO life and what that looks like, how would you describe that?
Yeah. So first thing I do in the morning usually is have a quiet time, which
Mhm.
is Bible study and prayer typically. Unfortunately, it's sometimes rushed and not as long as I would like, but that's how I start nearly every single day. Um, and then usually work out,
Mhm.
which for me is typically a run or weights or something. But I work out on a very regular basis. And then I will try and see the kids off in the morning. One of the great things about sort of having your own company is that you can set your own schedule a little bit, and
Right.
it's important for me to sort of see them off in the morning. So I'll do that. Get into the office usually around 9:30. So actually not super early, and then it is a whirlwind while I'm here typically. In fact, usually things online, emails, that kind of thing don't get touched during the workday because it's basically a whole bunch of meetings and calls back to back.
Mhm.
I try and schedule my life in the smallest possible increments that I possibly can. Elon Musk, I think, is famous for sort of scheduling in 5 minute increments. I'm not that bad. I don't have the intellect of Elon Musk, but I do try to be very very efficient, sort of 15-minute type increments. And
Mhm.
so it'll be a dozen or 20, 30 calls and meetings and that kind of thing. I do try and find during the day little pockets of time when I can have heads down time to work on
Mhm.
projects and that kind of thing. And then we typically leave here. It's not terribly late. It's probably 6 or 7. Go home, dinner
Mhm.
with the family, and some kid and family time, and then put
Mhm.
them down. And then I'm back on usually until probably 11 or 12, and that's
Mhm.
usually emails, heads down time. Even as a founder and CEO, I mean, you often owe other people deliverables.
Sure.
There's decks and spreadsheets and documents that I've got to produce, um, you
Right.
know, um, along with everyone else. And so I usually get to those things sort of in the late evenings, and then head to bed and do it all over again. So it's a very tiring lifestyle, but it's energizing because you're doing something that you
Mhm.
believe
Sure. Excellent. So, in winding up, uh, I have a question that is kind of a trivia question, and if you could tell me something about you that most people don't know.
That's a good question. Okay. When I was young, I had a very bad stuttering problem, which is funny because
Really?
then I became a trial lawyer and I do a lot of,
Mhm.
of public speaking and stuff now. But when I was probably fourth grade, fifth grade, had a terrible stuttering problem actually, and had speech therapy for it and all of that. It will still come out every once in a while. You'll sort of catch it, not that often usually, but yeah, that's likely something that people don't know.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, Mark, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, your busy schedule running the company there, and spend some time with the listeners here and just explaining, what your world looks like and the things that you're doing, building your legacy and building a company that helps build further legacies, you know, radiating from there. So I just appreciate you taking time out today to do that and everything that you're doing for the community as well.
No, thank you very much, James. It's my pleasure, and I really wish you and your listeners the very best. Veterans make special entrepreneurs, and I would encourage any veteran
Yes.
out there who is toying with the idea of entrepreneurship to pursue that.
Mhm.
We only have 70, 80, 90 years on this earth if we're lucky.
Mhm.
We have a responsibility to take the gifts that we've been given and use those for the benefit of others. And I think
Sure.
veterans uniquely are qualified, given the fact that they live here in America, and given the fact that they've had unique sort of training and insight and grit. They're
Mhm.
uniquely
Right.
qualified to become entrepreneurs and create businesses. And so I would encourage everyone listening to your show to do so, because life is short, and we can all find a way to both do good and do well.
Mhm.
It's tough to find, but you can do it.
So what's the best way for people to reach out to you, Mark, for contact?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to follow us on social media. So personally, I am at Mark Rockefeller on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And then the company StreetShares can visit us at streetshares.com. That's where folks can either apply for funding, they can invest in the loans that we're making to veteran entrepreneurs. We have a product called the Veteran Business Bond, which right now pays a 5% fixed rate. And we take that capital and we lend that out to veteran entrepreneurs. So you're making 5%, but your money is going toward a cause that you care about. You can also liquidate and pull that out anytime you want. So it's a very unique product out there right now. And then also the StreetShares Foundation is at the same website, and that's where folks can apply for grants, apply to attend one of our speed coaching sessions, and we have tons and tons of great content, videos, ebooks, downloads, that kind of thing. We're here to educate and support and fund veteran entrepreneurs, and all that is found at streetshares.com.
Perfect, Mark. Well, I appreciate your time this afternoon, and I'll see you around the bend, my friend.
Sounds good, James. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, sir. You've been listening to Legacy Cast. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to come back next time as we speak with more top influencers, industry experts, and business owners from around the world.